Thank you, folks, for the opportunity to come speak here today. Most of you don't know who I am. I'm from Grants Pass, born and raised there. My family's been in Oregon since the late 1800s. I have a doctorate in education, a master's in education, a bachelor's in education. I'm a state representative, been there 2 sessions. Grew up in a family of teachers. In fact, Mr. Nelson, Phil Nelson here, actually my mother, was a mentor for his wife, student teaching, and I didn't know that. It was interesting, small world. I've got 4 kids. You know, people ask me, why are you running to be a state superintendent? I've got 4 kids in the system, 15, 14, 12, and 9, and very recently we learned we have another one on the what? Yes, yeah, and anyway, so life is challenging. Life is challenging. Yeah, that's a little interesting. But I retired military, retired from the reserves, spent 21 years serving the country in various capacities, primarily in healthcare, but also in training soldiers. And so today, Oregon is ranked 43rd in overall educational outcomes. And I don't find that to be an acceptable state, and I don't think anybody really says that that's acceptable. But we need to make some changes in Oregon. Now, one of the major questions it's always is the funding question. You know, are there enough resources? Well, the superintendent doesn't have a vote on the resources. You advocate for funding, which is great. But we have a significant PERS cliff that we are going to fall off, and we can't just wish that away. There's going to be federal stimulus dollars that disappears. And we can't just fill the hole. We passed 66 and 67, and I don't think we're going to be able to go to that well too often. And I don't think Oregonians are going to be too inclined to raise taxes. You know, we talk about a third stool, just sales tax, for example. Oregon has over half of its budget, all funds budget, comes from fees. Over $27 billion in fees. So we are a very fee-dependent state. And we've raised fees, gas taxes, driver's license. And so I'm not sure that we are going to just, you know, open the faucet and increase our funding sources. What we do need to do is we need to provide more resources into the classroom. I believe that the Department of Education does need to be reformed, and that the reform needs to be turning this Department of Education from a regulatory punitive agency to more of a service agency. Service in the fact you still have a compliance role. The regulations still exist. But when the school district calls up, when I talk about service, that means you get the same answer every time. That we break down the silos between the directorships. That we allow that the employees in the Department of Education to communicate with each other so that we can, in fact, help districts. When the districts, the superintendents that I deal with, because I've been on a school board, I've chaired a school board, that the superintendents I talk to don't look to the Department of Education as a source of help. That, in fact, they, for the most part, attempt to avoid the Department of Education because they see that as an impediment. The regulations that we have thrust upon us through the federal government are enormous, and the state adds a burden to that. And so you have to begin to peel back this onion of regulation and figure out what's helping the kids and what's just feeding the bureaucracy for some reason. And at some point, you need to begin to push back. You have to push back against the feds and say no more. You've got to figure out what's statutory in the state of Oregon, what's regulatory. If it's regulatory, as an agency, you can rewrite the rules. If it's statute, you can, oh, thank you. If it's a statute, then you work with the legislature to change the statute. Folks, we need to do better for our kids in the state of Oregon. We do. You know, it's been an interesting process to go around the state. Oregon's a very large state physically. We have very diverse populations, and we need to serve them all. Thank you for the time, and I look forward to the questions.